Erev Tov, everyone. So Chazal tell us something quite astounding. The Gemara Brachot, a few bets, Chazal tell us that they considered Parshat Balak. There was a Havamina to include Parshat Balak as part of Kriyat Shema. When we think of this Parsha, it's somewhat obscure, somewhat strange, somewhat misunderstood, cryptic. Clearly, there's something very, very significant. Parshat Balak, that there was a thought even to include it as part of Kriyat Shema, one of the fundamentals of our faith, something that we say, we recite twice, 3 times every day. And Chazal, the Gemara says, so why did they not include it? Ma lo kavua. Mishum torach tzibur. Because of tirchad tzibur. It's going to take, it's bad enough we have to get through, v'havta, v'ayan, shamoah, right? 3 paragraphs. You're going to add on Parshat Balak, take another 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. That's going to be torach tzibur, and that's going to be too much. So it's interesting. The Gemara doesn't say, intrinsically the Havamina remains, meaning it's not that the content, it's not that it wasn't important enough, wasn't significant enough. Yes, it is, but there's a tirchad tzibur. So it's been a few minutes talking about tirchad tzibur, this concept, interesting halachic concept, which comes up in many places. Probably the most commonly used, and many of the expressions, the applications of tirchad tzibur are related to tefillah, related to Beit HaKnesset, related to things we do or don't do within the Beit HaKnesset. Rav Shavai says in one of his shiurim, in Mincha Shiur, he talks about tirchad tzibura. So he brings 5, 6, 7 different cases whereby this principle is invoked in the realm of Hilchot Tefillah. So, for example, it says that when it comes to the Shmoneh Esrei, which we say on Shabbat, of course, it's another. Shmoneh Esrei is one of those misnomers in Halakha. We say that the name means 18. It's never 18 brachot, right? During the week it's 19, on Shabbat it's 7. We still call it Shmoneh Esrei. But on Shabbat, we leave out most of the brachot. We don't say them. Why? So there are those who say, the Rashba and others who write, it's because of tirchad tzibura, because it's going to take too long, davening, etc. There are other reasons, other explanations are brought as well, that you shouldn't ask for personal needs on Shabbat, etc. But the halakha is that if a person was davening on Shabbat, and you were on autopilot, and you were saying your Shmoneh Esrei, and you suddenly wake up and you find you're in the middle of one of the brachot of Chol, so you complete that bracha, and only then you go back to saying the correct bracha. Intrinsically, you could have said it on Shabbat as well, but it's tirchad tzibura. Another, he brings as well the fact that there is no chazarat hashatz, there is no repetition during Arvit. He says that could be related to this idea as well. If the shliach tzibur forgot or left something out in his personal Shmoneh Esrei, he doesn't repeat it. He relies on, not at Arvit, talking about Shachrit Mincha, right? He relies on the fact of the Chazarah that's also related to tirchad tzibura. There's even an opinion in the Yerushalmi, in Paskin this way, that if the Shliach Tzibur left out one of the brachot in the Chazarah, then he wouldn't go back because of tirchad tzibura, and etc. There are other cases as well. It's an interesting piece in the Meiri. The Meiri, in his commentary to Masechet Megillah, he's talking about why it is. And they also bring in terms of the aliyot, in terms of if you add on aliyot, you're at Shabbat morning, you start adding extra aliyot. Says a person you shouldn't have too many. That could also be tirchad tzibura and other expressions as well. But so the Meiri says he's talking about why Shabbat afternoon we have 3 aliyot and there is no haftarah. It's only in Shachrit. He writes as follows: says Shabbat v'mincha u'samuch le'elev shekvar amdu sham rubo shel yom b'kedusha. Says most of the day, right? If anybody ever complains it feels too long or something like that, go look at how long it was in the Meiri's day. He says, "Amdu sham rubo shel yom b'kedusha bein tefillah v'torah v'drasha, between davening, between the Torah, between the drashot, right? They were there, been in shul most of the day. V'yesh ba'arachatam torach gadol. Still fine, but you're going to make it too long. That's going to be a torah. That's going to be too much for people, and therefore he says that's the reason why we only have 3 aliyot and utam she'ein maftirin b'hen benavi. That's what he says over there. It's interesting. Rav Shavai points out as well that sometimes we find the concept of tirchad tzibura. We're not talking about hours. Sometimes we're talking about minutes, and sometimes talking about seconds. See how precious people's time is. But he brings a couple of examples, and he says at the end of the day, you can't. There's no klalim with this. You have to look at each situation and each halakha based on each case. But he says, for example, when a person gets called up for an aliyah to the Torah. So in terms of the sugya in Megillah, and the poskim talk about how one should say the brachot. Have the Sefer Torah open, have the Sefer Torah closed, etc. So it says, Shulchan Aruch brings down, and the Ramah says, that when you say the brachot after Kriyat Torah, after you've had your aliyah, so you roll the Sefer Torah closed. Right? There's a chashash, the Gemara says, We don't want people to think that you're looking inside the Torah and reading as if the brachot were written inside the Sefer Torah. So therefore, when you're finished, you roll up the Sefer Torah, you close it first, and then you say the brachot. What about at the beginning, when you say the brachot at the beginning of the Aliyah? So there are different opinions, and there are those who say close your eyes, there are those who say turn your head to the side. The Ramah says, turn your head to the side. He says, we don't say there that we'll roll up and close the Sefer Torah. Why? Because that's going to be Tirchat Tzibura, because then you have to spend a few seconds opening it up again before you read. Again, you might think, what's a few? But we see even for a very small amount of time, we're still concerned. He brings another example of which the Taz brings, which is, it says that when it puts on the talit, when you say the bracha before putting on the talit, so you meant to check the tzitziot beforehand. So he says if somebody gets called up to an aliyah and they take a talit and put it on, he says don't check the tzitzit then, because that's going to be, that says the Taz, that's going to be tircha the tzibura as well. So one of the classic cases where this is learned from is by the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, when he reads from the Sefer Torah, and he reads in two different parashiyot. So it says that he reads from the first parasha, and then the second parasha he reads, well, he doesn't read, he says Baal Peh. He says it from memory. Why? Because if you're going to roll the Sefer Torah at that time, that's going to be, I think the expression there is used as Kavod HaTzibur. We find these terms somewhat interchangeably. There is a difference between them, but sometimes they refer to the same thing, which is Kavod HaTzibur or Tirchat HaTzibur. So it says, that's the Gemara in Yoma. It says, why? He reads by heart. It says, Amai, Niglo v'nikre, let him roll and read it then. Amarav Huna, Braid Rav Yoshua, Amarav Sheshet, Lefisha en golelin Sefer Torah b'tzibur, mipnei kvod hatzibur. We don't make everybody wait while we roll the Sefer Torah. We read immediately. So the poskim say, we have over here a question, we have a contradiction, because the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Kuf Mem Dalet, Hichot Kriyat Torah, says the following. He says, "Ein golin Sefer Torah, but tzibur mnei kvod hatzibur." We don't. That's why when we have a different haftarah, we have on Yom Tov, etc., we take out 2 Sifrei Torah. Sometimes we take out 3 Sifrei Torah, so we won't have to roll it in between. What happens if you only have 1 Sefer Torah? You're in a situation where there is only one. So says the Shulchan Aruch, "Im ein lahem ela Sefer Torah echad, ve'em tzrichim likrot b'shnei inyanim, golelin v'yidachek kvod hatzibur." So in such a case, obviously, ideally is you have 2 different Sefer Torah. You take out both. You don't need to roll in between. There's no question of Tirchat HaTzibur. There's no question of Kvod HaTzibur, etc. But if you only have 1, then you roll from one place to the other, and then you read. So Magen Avraham writes over here, seems to be a contradiction. On the one hand, by the Kohen Gadol, we say you just read a Baal Peh. Why don't we say the same thing over here? Yeah, read it Baal Peh. So he says no. The assumption is that in this case, the tzibur is mochel al kvodo. The tzibur is in order to fulfill the mitzvah, adequately, we give up on that kavod. We're okay. We accept the tircha that takes place. He says by the Kohen Gadol, we can't say that because he makes a distinction between if it's just 1 kila or if it's the entire Klal Yisrael. Okay, there's a little bit of back and forth in that related to that Magen Avraham as well. One other question that comes up, and this is an interesting question, and it's fairly common. So we said, if you have 2 Sifrei Torah, you take out 2 Sifrei Torah so that you don't have to roll 1. If you only have 1, so you have to roll it, There's nothing else that can be done. And we say there, we set aside Ikvod HaTzibur. What if you have, sometimes maybe you only need 1 Sefer Torah, but you have more than 1 Sefer Torah in the Hechal. And it comes up to the person who opens it up, didn't listen to the Gabbai, and he takes out the wrong Sefer Torah. So then there's a question, right? Just comes up. It's been known to happen in shuls, this one, but it has been known to happen that the wrong Sefer Torah gets taken out. So the question is, what should you do? On the one hand, you would say, well, Tirchat HaTzibur, Kvod HaTzibur, right? You're going to take the Sefer Torah. You're going to have to stand there rolling the whole thing, depending on how far it is. It could take a long time. On the other hand, if you're going to put the Sefer Torah back and take the first one, so then you have a different problem. Maybe it's motzilaz. Maybe people are going to think that there's something wrong with the Sefer Torah, that it's not kasher, that there's a problem, or other issues as well. So if Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva on this, and Ingrot Moshe, very interesting, and he bases himself on he was asked, as a comparison by the Chacham Tzvi. The Chacham Tzvi has a case whereby somebody set aside wax candles that they were about to light for Hanukkah. And then, at the last minute, they were given, or they found olive oil, which is better to use for the mitzvah. So there's no question. He says Chacham Tzvi, there's no problem. The mitzvah mina muvchar is to use Shem inside. So leave those first candles that you had set aside and use those. So Moshe Feinstein is not convinced that the cases are comparable. He says over there, the reason why you said it, even if you want to say you can compare the Sefer Torah to the candles, he says over there it's because you're fulfilling the mitzvah in a more mehudar way. Whereas here, you're still fulfilling the same mitzvah of reading from the Torah, whether it's the one you had to roll, the one you didn't have to roll. There's an external consideration of Tirchat Tzibora, of Kvarat Tzibora, but that's something else. That's not considered. He says, if you had two Sifrei Torah, let's say one of them was Mehudar, and one of them was Kasher al Pi Chak. Maybe there was a Shaila, maybe you weren't sure if the Sefer Torah was kosher, so then it's more Mehudar to use the more Mehudar Sefer Torah. So then you could set it aside. Anyway, he goes back and forth. He's not conclusive in his answer. At the end of the day, he says, he leans more towards the side which says, use the Sefer Torah which you've already taken out, and roll it, even though it's going to take time. He says, certainly, if there's going to be a machloket about it, somebody says, no, you have to. Says you should avoid the machloket, and there's signs on both the sides of what to rely on, so you should do that. Rav Shavai in Mincha Maariv Shiur, he says that it depends when you realize. He said, if you're still standing there and the Aaron is open and you're just taking it out and you realize, he says, then you can go and you haven't actually brought the Sefer Torah out yet, then it would be fine to remove and take the other one. But you've already closed the Aaron, you've already brought the Sefer Torah out, then you would have to roll that and read from that one. עד כאן. רבי חנניה בן עקש שאומר, שהקדוש ברוך הוא לזכות ישראל, לפרח בעל המצוא המצוות, שנאמר אדוני חפץ למען צדקו,